Alright, welcome back to this Supercoach Nuff channel. In this video, we're going to have a crack at predicting the 2024 NRL ladder. So I did have a request for this video from a subscriber, and I can't remember who it was, so I do apologise. And it's something I probably wasn't going to do just because I'm a terrible picker. In tipping, I'm usually at the bottom end of the scale. Probably spend too much time looking at the players rather than the teams themselves for Supercoach and NRL fantasy purposes. But, I guess you ask and you shall receive. So we're going to have a crack and I guess go through my thoughts on the sort of final shake-up of the 2024 season. And I should just mention as well, this is being recorded before any preseason trials, anything like that. So it's all just gut reactions and thoughts and opinions, and we'll see. We could do a little review of this at the end of the season and have a laugh about how far off I was. But we'll start from obviously Team 17. And I think we're going to try and go a bit controversial to begin with. But I've actually got the Dolphins for the spoon this year. And it's no disrespect to the team. I think, it's just a case of that there'll be more teams aware of what they're about this year. They got off to a fast start last season. But then, sort of in the back half of the season, their lack of sort of depth did start to show a bit. They've obviously got some good ins like Tommy Flegler, Averillo and Farnworth in the back line, but they are still very reliant on an ever-aging forward pack with the Bromwich brothers, Felice Kafusi. Again, I'm totally predicting that I'll be wrong, but I just think that the Dolphins might be in for a slightly tougher season than last year. I guess at 16 I have gone the Tigers, give them a bit of a break after their last couple of wooden spoons. But it sort of does appear like, they are just waiting for Jerome Luai. Probably their biggest sort of signing this season is Justin Olam in the centres. They've got a whole new sort of halves combination they're looking at least until Adam Dewey can get back fit. So they'll obviously take some time to get into it and that. But I guess, we talked about the Dolphins and the Wayne Bennett effect that they have. It'll be interesting to see how Benji Marshall sort of impacts that squad. He did follow Wayne Bennett around a bit, and sort of would have definitely picked up some stuff off of him from, the coaching sense. But obviously, adding his own sort of sense of attacking flair to it. So it'll be interesting to see how they go. And I guess hopefully for the Tigers fans, and I've got a couple of mates who are in that camp, they can get themselves off the foot of the table. At 15th, I've gone with the Raiders. And again, it seems like another team in a sort of a rebuild. There's been all this chat about, who's going to play six, who's going to play fullback, who's going to play in the centres. So, there seems to be a bit of, unsureness about it. And most of the options that they're talking about are either, quite experienced, like a Jordan Rapiner, or quite young, like, a KO Weeks or a Chevy Stewart, even for a fullback spot. And so, I think, it's just going to be one of those seasons where they get some experience into those guys, continue to develop them. Josh Papali'i, can he still hang like he used to? It all remains to be seen. But I think, 15th sounds about right for the Raiders at the moment. 14th, I've gone with the Titans, which again might seem a bit harsh, but and again, this might have a bit of bias involved with the way Desi Hasler hung the dogs out to dry way back when. But it'll just be interesting to see, where he's at in terms of the modern play. And I think he's definitely looking at some good things like putting Jaden Campbell at fullback. AJ Brimson to the centres is a bit unfortunate. But I think they really need to find a halfback that they can get into the future with. Kieran Foran's not going to last forever. And I guess as well, he's probably holding up the development of, say, like an AJ Brimson, who probably would slot into the six long term. So, yeah, as much as I'm a fan of the Titans in the sense of I love Big Tina, I love Dave Fafita, um, I guess that's the other thing too, is an injury to one of those boys, yeah, they will definitely sort of impact their strike ability in the forwards. Um, and so obviously, you could see them having a bit of a tough time of it. 13th, I've gone with the Dragons. So, another new coach coming in. I think probably the advantage they have is a player like Cole Flanagan. He could probably unlock Ben Hunt in a sense. It's very much been a one man team in recent years. But just sort of having someone who can take a bit of pressure off Hunt could, sort of see him do a bit. Um, but ultimately, I just think there's better teams above the Dragons, so they slotted in at 13th. Um, so before we get into like 12th and up, I think this is the point where teams could realistically make the finals. Um, so I'm definitely expecting a lot of flux in these positions. It will come down to a bit of luck with injuries and the like. But I've currently got the Eels sitting in 12th. So they didn't finish that well last year, and they haven't really brought in any players to try and fix it. They're sort of backing the same team in again. Um, you hope things like Dylan Brown getting a suspension and that won't happen, and you never know how much that would have cost the Eels overall. Um, and it's not to say they're a bad team by any stretch, but again, might be a little bit of bias given the team I support, and people might start to notice that they haven't appeared yet. We're getting there, just relax. But yeah, I've got the Eels sitting at 12th, but like I said, I wouldn't be surprised if they landed in the top eight somewhere. They've definitely got the potential. Um, it's just, I guess, they need things to go their way. 11th, I've gone with Manly, and sort of with each one, it gets a little bit tougher. And this is probably going to contradict a statement I'm going to make later in the video. But, I think the reason why I had Manly 11th probably just comes down to their forward pack. Just, you've got Big Jakey, who always puts in an honest effort. Paseka started to look good last year. But after that, there's really not much doing. Like, I know someone sent me a message asking about what I thought about Corey Waddell, and I watched him at the Dogs last year. Um, I thought, well, he's probably a NRL Dogs player this season, but he probably wouldn't get a run at any other NRL club. Um, he tries hard, but he's just not at that level. So and they're talking about him possibly replacing Schuster on that left edge, the guy they've paid all the money to, who mightn't have the fitness and the sort of the I don't know what the word is, but to cut it at the NRL level, I suppose. 10th place, I've gone with the Roosters. Again, it's getting harder and harder to whittle down the teams. Um, and it was sort of like toss the coin a few ways. But I guess the reason for this is their ins this year is Dom Young in what was already a pretty stacked backline, um, and Spencer Lenu, who does offer impact off the bench, um, but probably the Roosters still do have a bit of weakness in those middle forwards. Perhaps Terrell May continue his elevation from the back end of last year to go with Lindsay Collins. Jared Ware Hargraves. How long is he? What's he got left in the tank? Um, so yeah, again, wouldn't be surprised if they made the eight. They probably should be a top eight team, but they sort of felt 10th in the order that I had. Ninth, I've gone with the Knights, and again, if they're firing, they should make the top eight, but probably a little bit too reliant on Ponga. You'd imagine he'll put his hand up for Origin this year if he can stay fit. Um, and then I guess if he can't as well, that'll obviously impact the Knights because he's in a lot of people's super coach teams for that reason, is that he is just that dominant at the moment and sort of on that trajectory in his career. Um, but and it's not to say they're a one man team by any stretch. They've got the likes of Best and Gagai in the centres. Tyson Frizzell in the forwards is one of the best going around. The Saifidi brothers, they've played at the Origin level, so they've got enough pieces there. It's again, it'll come down to luck. I think that if they make the eight. So this is, I guess, the most controversial call, and I will put all the cards on the table for those that are new to the channel or just watching this out of the blue. I am a Bulldogs fan, a tragic Bulldogs fan, but I honestly believe that they can make the top eight this year. Like they've completely overhauled the squad that's been talked about. They've got a lot more competition for positions now. So much so that no one really knows the 17 they're going to drag out for the round one, and that's myself included. But and this again might be a bit of bias because of following a bit of chat and podcasts and stuff. But all the word from what I can hear is the Bulldogs identified last year that it was the defence that was an issue. They struggled with Seraldo's system. Um, but Seraldo's system is the same system they've used at the Panthers. They've used it at the Warriors. The Warriors were able to pick it up. Um, Josh Curran, I saw a little podcast he did, Bloke in a Bar, and he basically said it's the same thing. So he's on board, and if he's going to play in that 13 role, that's a big part of, the defensive issues they had last year was through the middle. So, you know, that plus, I guess, again, every club talks about how good it is and stuff, but there's just so much great chat about the Dogs coming out. And, there's always that one team that, sort of comes up out of the blue every year and people are like, oh, like last year it was the Warriors. No one expected them to finish where they did. Um, so, yeah, for me, I think this year it's just going to be the Dogs. I don't fully buy into the hype about, it's 2014 final, 2004 premiership, 94 final, 84, all the 4 years. Um, but I think, they're the ones, the dark horses to make the eight. So I've thrown them in, obviously in eighth. I did have them as high as sixth originally, but then I thought that was probably taking the piss. If they make eight, I'll be ecstatic as a Bulldogs fan, given the sort of few years we've had. And yeah, so they're my sort of flyers for the top eight. But as I said, it's usually that there's those teams from about fifth to 12th that are always super close, and you can probably put them in any order. So seventh, I've gone with the Cowboys. Just a very settled side. Um, you know, like haven't really brought anyone in this season, but don't really have to. They've got quality across the board. Um, yeah, so I don't think they'll sort of push deep into the finals. But and again, you could take them out and put any one of like the Knights, Roosters, Manly, Eels in, and that would totally make sense. But you know, juggled all the pieces around, and they ended up at seventh. So sixth, I've gone to Souths. I think having Jack White come into play centre, that's massive. He's an NRL quality 5'8", and so just having that extra sort of ball playing option out wide, um, and like his pace and everything else about his game, just makes that what's already been a sort of favoured and quite strong left edge, makes it, it adds a completely different dimension. And all the chat about perhaps moving Koloamatangi across, it sort of feels like the Panthers left edge a few years ago where they had Kickow, Matty Burton feeding was it Ty, or it might have even been the year Taylor May was on the wing. Just a ridiculously stacked left edge. Um, so yeah, they I think they're a good chance at the 8. Again, I don't know if they've got enough in their middle forwards to go all the way. Obviously, Cam Murray is massive for them in the middle, but they're talking about maybe putting him a bit of time on the edge. Jai Arrow's obviously, origin level player, um, but Tommy Burgess isn't getting any younger. Satola, hopefully he can get over his concussion issues. But yeah, on ability, Souths are well and truly in the 8. But might not quite be there on the last day of the season. Fifth, I've gone with the Sharks, so another sort of very settled team. Um, no one really coming into the side. Couple of players leaving, but they've got cover. The likes of Trindle to play 5'8". Got a few young up and comers as well, the likes of Dykes, Iro, Atkinson. Creating that competition for spots, which is nice in the backs. Their forwards have always been solid. Um, Nicker and Hines, that combination is pretty nice on that edge. So, I mean, they're going to be there or thereabouts. Probably unlucky not to feature in the top 4. Um, but again, can't fit all of them in the top 4, so they landed in 5th. So, speaking of 4th, I've gone with the Storm. Um, so despite having, I guess, what was a rough year for them last year, they still managed to make top 4. You know, hopefully Pappenhausen's back fit and firing. Um, Sean Bloor, I think, is a really good get for the Storm to sort of strengthen their edge play. Um, but, Fa'alongo, big chat about him, obviously. Looks like he might play that bench utility where they've started Pappenhausen and the like in the past, which isn't ideal for us as super coaches, but for his development as a player, absolutely brilliant. So I think the Storm will finish 4th. Um, and I guess, if you're working out the teams that are left, the other 3 are probably going to be quite familiar. But I went with the Warriors in 3rd. I was really tempted to put them number 1 just because I guess after the Dogs, probably, would love to see the Warriors get a win. Um, especially given all the COVID stuff, and then just as well, the style of play they had last year was really amazing, and Sean Johnson at the peak of his powers still, and that epic forward pack. They could all play 80 minutes if you asked them to, so just a supremely fit forward pack. The likes of Nickel Klokstad and Dallin Watene-Zelezniak carving up in the back line. There's not a lot of weakness in that side, and Webster, as we talked about, has that defensive system set up there, and it's working well. So whether they can challenge the top 2, I'd love to see it. Um, but the other 2 teams are quite good. So I guess again, there's probably an argument that the Broncos should move up a spot, but I've put them at 2. Um, and yeah, it's really just, I guess, because the Panthers, to give away the last one, they're just the best team in the comp. I think this is the last year of the dynasty. I think Jerome Luai is going to be a massive out for the team, um, just because him and Cleary have had that combination for so long from the junior days right through. Um, they do just have that factory line of talent. Um, but I guess, when you win 3 in a row, um, yeah, it's got to come to an end at some point. Um, but yeah, the Broncos, again, there's not really a weakness across the field, maybe other than Kurt Capewell's exit. Pierre Cora, can he stand up? I guess a lot of us super coaches and NRL fantasy guys are hoping so, um, because that'll create great value. Um, and I guess missing Herbie Farnworth, can they get someone to cover what he give to the team from the centre position? Yeah, so yeah, I've got it's pretty predictable at the end there, like no big shocks. And just looking through, like, the obvious one is the dogs making the 80s, the big call. But I guess, it's just pure belief, perhaps. Um, the Dolphins, again, they might not finish last, but I think, yeah, it's just represent. I didn't really want to put the Tigers last and make it obvious at the start, but then I've made it obvious putting the Panthers at the top. So that's how it goes. Like I said, I predict that this will be completely wrong. That's the one prediction that you can probably take away from this video. But like I said, you ask and you shall receive. So if you've got any thoughts on this, you want to tell me how far down the list the Bulldogs should be, um, feel free to add a comment to this video. Add your own ladder predictions if you like. We can have a good look at that at the end of the season. But yeah, if you're enjoying the NRL stuff, remember to give the videos a like. Subscribe for all the fantasy content. And other than that, we'll catch you in the next one.